2 more years, Somalia's president defies global pressure and extends his mandate. Will the move undermine elections or strengthen them? And how will regional and international players react? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Sami Zaidan. Somalia's president has signed a controversial law extending his mandate for 2 years. Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed's 4-year term expired in February. But on Monday, the lower house of parliament voted to extend it. That decision threatens to further divide the nation and worsen its political crisis. The African Union, EU and United Nations say they won't support the extension. Mohamed, also known as Farmajo, previously reached an agreement with leaders of 5 federal states to prepare for elections in late 2020 and early 2021. But that deal collapsed after groups failed to agree on how to conduct the vote. Many now fear the instability will embolden the armed group Al-Shabaab, which for years has been trying to topple the government. Well, Catherine Soy has more from Nairobi in neighbouring Kenya.
Some Somalis say this decision to extend the term of the president and government by another 2 years is problematic on so many levels. It has already faced rejection from the Senate, a coalition of opposition presidential candidates and leaders from 2 of the 5 regional states. We've also seen very strongly worded statements from some of Somalia's key donors, the US, the EU and the UK, all speaking in one tone, saying that if this doesn't change, then they're going to rethink how they do business with the government of Somalia, and also talking about targeted sanctions. They also say they want the stakeholders in this electoral process to go back to the drawing board, resume talks and go back to an agreement that was made last September on holding an indirect election as soon as possible. But then talks on how to conduct that election have failed, and the president and his allies have blamed leaders from particularly 2 states, Jubaland and Puntland, for being stumbling blocks, a hindrance to that electoral process. They say, the president and his supporters say that this extension is crucial because the country cannot be in a vacuum for too long.
Now, for decades, Somalia has been at the centre of civil war, famine and unrest. It began to fall apart in 1991 when warlords ousted President Siad Barre and then turned on each other. Attempts at peace saw several interim civilian regimes installed between 1991 and 2000. A transitional federal government established in 2004 took control of most areas from the Islamic Courts Union, or ICU. It then splintered, though, and its armed wing, Al-Shabaab, began to fight government forces and their African Union peacekeeping allies. Well, the group still controls large parts of southern and central Somalia. A new provisional constitution was passed in August 2012. It reformed Somalia into a federation of 5 states. Well, 5 years later, then former Prime Minister Farmajo was elected by Parliament as president, despite threats from Al-Shabaab. Let's bring in our guests into the show. We have joining us in Mogadishu, Zakaria Haji Abdi. He's a member of Parliament and former Minister of Information. In Toronto, Hudan Ali is aid and development expert. In Doha, Afyari Elmi is an associate professor of security studies at Qatar University. Welcome to you all. If I could start with Zakaria in Mogadishu. Zakaria, is this move by the president to extend his mandate, is it legitimate?
I think you misread the whole situation. There is no president who extended his mandate in 2 years. It is the parliament. By the way, we don't have a lower house.
But he did approve the lower house of parliament's decision, though, right?
By the way, we don't. Can I finish, please? By the way, we don't have a lower house. We call it People's House. The parliament decided to end the stalemate that the country has experienced for the last 8 months. because of the, bickering between 8 people, or say, from the regions and the central government, that could not decide the fate of the country to go to what they call indirect election. I don't call election, this is a selection, a bunch of tribal selectees, members of parliament, and this is the only system in the world for the 198 countries that their institution is based on a tribal dictatorship or tribal selection. So we want to depart this, type of election or selection, and go to the forward to the democratic system of giving people their power back to select their representatives. This is what happened, and there is no 2 years. We said the maximum time to hold an election is 2 years. If the committee of the election, the National Committee of Election, tomorrow, if they say within 2 months we will hold the election, fine, there's no problem. But This is the right path. This is the democratic path to elect representatives of the public all over the world.
Okay, let me bring in Hodan. What can then possibly be wrong? You heard the message there from Zakaria. It's been repeated by President Mohamed. He wants to reform the electoral process so that it's basically one man, one vote, direct elections. Let people choose their leaders rather than the current system, which Zakaria describes as kind of a mess of really endorsing the power or the dictatorship, as he put it, of clans.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Sam, for having me. I concur with MP Zakaria on the need to have one person, one vote. However, I think countries are governed by rules and laws and constitution. What transpired earlier this week, passing this legislation through the People's House, really is sort of a violation of the current constitution Somalia has. To pass such legislation, you do need the People's House and also the Senate agreeing to pass the legislation. We need to be careful as we espouse to have democratic way forward, that we're actually respecting the current rules and regulations that we have, and we're abiding by constitutional processes, right? It's unfortunate that right now we are facing this division within the country, albeit it's not just from the government, but also the regional governments that have.
Okay, Hodan, let me jump in there because
part of the problem.
You've raised a good point, and I want to briefly take that point back to Zakaria and get his reaction to that. Zakaria, this was not a legitimate move because it was only approved by one of the houses of parliament, the People's House, rather than including the Senate too. How do you respond to that suggestion from Hodan?
This is also misread. The Senate, which is new to Somalia. This is the first term that we have a Senate actually in this parliamentary term. The Senate. First of all, there are two lines of two guidelines. One is that there are things that we both do, and there are things that we could not do together. I mean, each chamber should do it, separately. Most of the laws we pass in the People's House, Parliament, goes directly to the president. Some categories of the laws, which concerns to the states, we as a People's House, we represent the people. The Senate represented the administrations in the 5 regions of Somalia. So if the thing is concerned onto those states, those federate states, then they have to be in the picture. But this is not something concerned to Senate or the states, the federal state, the members of the Somali government.
Let me jump in then, and let me give Hodan a chance to come back in on that.
This is a national issue. It's not a local thing for the regions.
All right, Hodan, You're misreading the
No,
Constitution is the suggestion from Zakaria, and the Senate does not need to be involved in this.
Well, I'm not a constitutional expert. I mean, it's clear that you do need both houses of parliament to pass such legislation. But if I could go back even further, the mandate of the current parliament has expired. The mandate of the president has expired. These are facts. These are not something that MP Zakaria and are debating. So in order for us to have a healthy way forward, it is imperative that the country actually comes together and agrees upon a process. It is not a process that is seen as an illegitimate process. Whether the MP accepts that or not, there are, a large section of the country that opposes the move. And in the end of the day, what we want is to get to a one person, one vote, but that has to come from an acceptable, legitimate process that goes through due process. In the end of the day, nations are governed by rules and regulations, and we can't jumpstart when we do feel, we want to get ahead with a certain perspective. And then these are actually, the facts on the ground. The president has actually signed the legislation. You have an entire section of the population, including federal states, and we can risk the having the country apart and this unity opening.
Right. All right. Let me, if I may, let me jump in here. Let me bring in. Okay, you've made that point, but let me bring in Afyari and ask the question. Afyari in Doha. At the end, I think most people would probably agree with what Hudan is saying, that there does need, that all parties agree that there does need to be reform, and she would like, as I'm sure many Somalis would like to see it be done in a way that has the support of most people. But at the end of the day, that was precisely the problem, is that the parties could not agree, could they, Afyari, on how to reform the electoral process, how to hold elections. Was there then any real alternative but to extend the mandate of the president and let the parliament run over time?
Well, thank you very much, Sam. Basically, I agree with Hodan on this issue that the decision taken by the House of People is illegitimate, and basically it was a power grab. They had 4 years if they want to conduct elections. They failed it. They have also another venue, which is more like if they can't organize a credible and inclusive election, what they need to do is go back and secure some sort of a political agreement. These are the only two ways. What we have here right now is that one of the two chambers decided, and by the way, both of them, that their term has expired. So one of the two chambers and the president want to make some sort of a power grab and just extend their term illegally, and this is unacceptable. There is no legal basis of extension in the Constitution. That's one thing. But there is a more important point.
But that's my point, Afyari. That's my question. How would they hold new elections, either for the president or to renew the parliament, if they simply can't agree on how to hold elections?
Well, here, I believe, based on my information on the last talks and also the talks prior to the, this one in Dusamareb, the decision was within reach, and the government actually stepped out simply because they wanted to gerrymander their own results, or if they don't get it, they wanted just to stage manage some sort of extension. And that's what happened. And what I just wanted to mention here is that it's not about the legality of the decision taken here. It's about the consequences of such a decision. We're talking about a very fragile state, and such a reckless decision actually threatens the nascent democracy and also the stability and the unity of the country. I think this should not be allowed at all, and it should be rejected in every account. This is unacceptable in my view.
All right, let me bring in Zakaria and ask you for your response to that. Regardless of the question of the legitimacy and whether the president had the right to approve this vote coming from the People's Assembly, the People's House, putting all of that aside, what do you make of Afyari's argument, and I think it's supported as well by Hudan and many Somalis, that at the end of the day, if you don't have the support of enough of the Somali people, then you're actually undermining the institutions of the country and its very stability if not enough people are on board?
Well, gentlemen, we have passed the days where a few people nominate themselves as the government of the Somalia. For the last 30 years, we have been under the tribal dictatorship and tribal logic. Somalia needs to change and transform as the 21st century state. What we have done is the core of the constitution. It's not illegitimate. And by the way, most of the people, that's what they believe, not the vice versa, as you said in your intervention. The parliament represents
my question was if enough of the people are not on board. Clearly, there's not enough people on board if we're hearing a lot of disagreement from Somalis.
You have no right to say that because you have not counted all the people. You haven't done any selection or election or whatever, or you have not counted the whole people.
I didn't claim. I don't think, sir, I need to count all the people to know that from reports there are many Somalis. I did not claim whether the majority are for or against this, but there are many voices which seem to be doubting that this move will be conducive to stability, right? You don't deny that. Are you saying that all Somalis support the decision by the president? Is that what you're telling viewers?
Are you arguing with me or are you asking me a question?
I'm asking you a question. You asked me a question that whether I had mispresented the idea that enough people are on board.
What undermined the statehood of the Somali people, what undermined the statehood of the Somalia is the tribal selection and the hegemony of tribalism. There are only two clans in Somalia who are supposed to be, for on their perception, to be the president or the prime minister. This is, and when the term finishes, they want to jump in the position and they say this is our time. No, we're not playing this anymore. What we are playing now is a democratic path. We have to bring back Somalia into the democratic path. For example, they say the term is finished. Yeah, that's right. Our term is finished, but there is no any other parliament. Those who advocate this frame, this word of term finished, they are actually advocating a chaotic system. Shall we go from the office and say, okay, the offices are empty, the country is in a vacuum, ma'a salama? No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't play like that.
All right.
We have to constitute a way that the country goes to a right path, a right election, and then we go. Those who are elected newly by the government will come in our place. But there is no one now to fill the vacuum.
All right, let me bring in Afyari again.
Bye. We have done. It's our time. Our time is up, and we're going outside. No, that's not the way. Works.
All right, let me bring Afyari into the discussion again. How important are determinant are elections of power in a country, in a society like Somalia, where, in any case, it seems to be clans that hold the power, and a country that's dominated by foreign powers, many would argue?
I think for the last 20 years, we had one component of democracy, which is rotation of power. It happened through dispensations, and these dispensations are either through clan elders or some sort of accepted formula by the stakeholders. So that is what we had. And at the moment, that's under threat simply because a regime that's incumbent, that does not want to organize credible and inclusive elections, or just to go through normal political dispensation process, wants just to extend itself. And this is really unacceptable. So just let me just remind you one thing. President Abdullahi Yusuf, when, for instance, when he disagreed on the way things were progressing, he decided just to step down and said, no, I disagree with what's going on, and he left the power. The other two presidents also faced the similar problem, but they had to go back and negotiate with the stakeholders of Puntland and Jubaland and other places, so that they just, come to some sort of an acceptable conclusion. What we have, or what we expected from President Formaggio, was just to either, conduct some sort of a legitimate election. If he can't, he has to go back and negotiate and compromise and get a deal. Compromise, it doesn't mean that he just gets his way on. Okay. That he failed.
All right,
this is
let me,
where
if
we are
I can, let me bring in Hodan and ask this question. It's not only a controversial question within Somalia, it's a controversial question for many of the foreign powers that have interests and support Somalia. Do you think that the president will be able to withstand the disapproval of powers like the United Nations and the US, which the country, of course, relies on for a lot of aid, right?
Absolutely, and I work in the aid and development sector, and I know that quite well. 70% of Somalis live under the poverty index of $2 per day. What we need to remember is the vast majority of Somalis need peace and stability, and not political jostling over who stays in power and who is not. The reality remains that the political insecurity of Somalia today is quite precarious, and we cannot afford to go back to the days of violence. What I urge is for all sides to practice caution and to ensure that dialogue and resumption of talks is prioritized, rather than empty rhetoric and smoke screening about what the people want. What the people want is a legitimate process that is inclusive, that follows the current structures and regulations and rules that we have, abiding by the Constitution, the provisional Constitution. Coming back to, can the government withstand the pressures from the outside? The reality is, Somalia doesn't have complete control over all of its affairs, including security. We have over 20,000 AMISOM troops in Somalia, guarding Villa Somalia, if I may add. So in the end of the day, we need to make sure that we understand what's at stake. Shabab is at the foothills of Mogadishu, operates in Mogadishu, and that is the reality. The vast majority
do you think it will strengthen our Shabab, Hodan, very briefly?
Absolutely. The ones gaining momentum right now are Shabab. And I think that's where Somalis need to put their focus.
We've got a minute left. I want to bring Zakaria into this then and give him a chance to come back on some of this. How concerned is the central government about the resurgence of al-Shabaab as a result of this controversy?
Oh, before that, let me answer some questions, some important questions. First of all, I do not know the logic that 275 MPs who represent the Somali people are not legitimate, but only 8 people or 5 people are the legitimate of the Somali people. This is incomprehensible. I cannot understand that. Number 2, Somalia is a sovereign state, is a country that has its independence in 1960. We are not under any obligation to in our affairs, when we are managing our affairs for any other country or international community. It is up to the Somali people to choose their representatives. Lastly, but not least, is that
so we've got 30 seconds. So
this is a psychological problem. This is what they call fear of unknown. Those who do not want to go to the path of direct elections and the democratic path, they are afraid from the consequences. So we have to do it, by the way. We have to do it. I mean, we were out of this for the last 50 years.
Right, okay.
The last time we had a direct election was 1967.
Right. Okay, I'm afraid we are out of time, so we're going to have to leave it there and thank our guests. I'm sure that this discussion can go on, and I'm sure we will have further opportunity in the future to continue this discussion. For now, let's thank all of our guests Zakaria in Mogadishu, Hodan in Toronto, and Afyari here in Doha. And thank you too for watching. You can see the show again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, head over to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From me, Sami Zaidan, and the whole team here. For now, it's goodbye.